If you've ever used a router plane before, it comes in two versions. We have a flat sole and we have this open space in front. When you're cutting, and I'm not going to readjust this right now because I have it set to the depth I want, and you'll find that resetting the depth is something you don't want to do a lot, but if you used the router plane before to clean out some sort of housing or dado, you know that without the depth gauge rod, you have to constantly readjust the blade. On the old Stanleys, these are awkward. It doesn't work that smoothly, it's not that accurate, and unless you got a really long run, you'll probably spend more time adjusting the plane than you will using it to cut. And then if you're doing several housings of the same depth, you have to come back and hit the exact same depth on each one of these individual housings that you've done separately. So what Stanley or somebody figured out at some point, probably at least 100 years ago, maybe quite a bit longer, is that you can set the blade to your final depth and not have to adjust it again by using this, what Stanley calls a depth gauge rod, to limit the amount of wood you take off in any one pass. It is actually, and I love these 50s graphics. It came with, I bought the box and everything years ago. It's actually in the instructions, but the designation for the part was a little vague in their illustration, and I really didn't understand it. It took a while to figure out. So, one way to adjust it, make sure that it's not resting on the sole, it's resting on the back of the plane. And use a couple business cards. Back from the edge of the plane, and use that to set the depth gauge rod. And that will be essentially the depth of the cut you're taking off. So if you were to put a straight edge on there, you can see there's probably maybe a heavy 30-second thickness on that angle. So the thing I found is to be systematic. It's the most helpful thing you can do. If you get greedy, you're going to make work for yourself. So systematically work back from the far end towards you. And you try and keep it away from the edges here and damaging the edges. But you notice the cut is deepening, no readjustment necessary. Now this is cutting quite aggressively, which suggests to me that the depth rod has slipped its adjustment, which is fairly typical of the, yes, quite a bit. So you see that happening, readjust. These little thumb screws, you can put a wrench on it, and if you break these, you're probably going to have to buy another plane, because these could be pretty difficult to replace. So you have to keep your eye on it. Now once you've gotten some depth past your borders here, you can go a little bit faster because it will prevent you from jumping out of the cut and damaging that edge. There's a little bit difficulty finishing off at the edges, so you might have to change approach. Luckily this is the underside of the stairs. Probably this wouldn't show when we were done, so I could continue to do this and risk splitting out the back end. A couple ways to deal with it is to take your chisel and pretty much down to the line, chisel back. And as you approach that line, the bulk of the waste will be gone. You'll have less chance of splitting it out. It's a little difficult to come back in here on the short because you don't have too much to balance on. So it's much easier to kind of work from this direction. But as I say, you risk tear out on the sometimes the grain just changes direction. And so this has no way to eliminate tear out, or even for that matter, big chunks of tear out. Now, one of the reasons why you want to proceed pretty systematically, you can't just keep hopping around, because this depth gauge rod will hang up. So if your surface is rough, it'll just bang into the roughness and it'll restrict a cut. So here we are down at the end again. Tricky business. Going pretty well so far. Have to just catch the blade beyond there. If you get down pretty close, you can come back from the other direction. So you only got a little bit remaining to take off, and probably not chip out the backside. And you can see the rod has hit the far side there, so if we want to finish it up, we can back the rod off if we have to get in there. Might be able to clean that up a little bit. All right, so that's the housing cleared out. Let's check our model here. And without the wedging, we're pretty close. I got a little bit of air on the nosing there. Now I should be able to eliminate that with a little bit of trimming of the housing here with the side rabbet plane. The danger in that is on a full set of stairs, this might kick the lower tread and the upper tread off a little bit, just enough to create backlash, shall we say, where you end up having to trim a little here, trim a little there to get it in to fit into a dado like this. I think that's the reason why most of the time this dado to the tread was eliminated, because you got a little bit of play up and down and a little bit this way, and you can just, when you glue the stairs up, you can nail from the backside and pull that all up tight. So I'm going to trim that with the side rabbet plane and see if we can improve that a little bit. Oh yeah. In fact, I think we got a little bit on the top there, but this may be as good as we're going to get today. So when the stair was going to be assembled, the installer would have a bucket full of wedges and a pot full of hot glue, coat the end of the treads or the housing with glue, coat the wedges with glue, and drive it home. Tighten everything up. So that's your stairs. Another one, of course, would come out here and rise up there.